Vinny, I found out the news yesterday about a man that you worked for, Lou Holtz, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think it took a minute for me to text you, knowing how close you were with him. When did you first meet Lou Holtz?
1983. And I was on the staff at Minnesota. Joe Salem was the coach. I was a GA. And Joe Salem got fired during the year, and then they brought in, and I was out recruiting because all the coaches were fired. So one of the assistants said, go out and recruit. So I was out recruiting, and then Lou came in, and he let me stay on as a GA because I was recruiting, and, there was some kids that were coming. But, we'd have these luncheons, and he'd get up and speak and everything. And speaking, it was like you're in awe of listening to him speak. Then he'd have the coaches stand up. Every time he introduced me, Vinny Iovino, stand up. I'm like, who's that? It was me. I guess he had another coach or a player at one point who was Vinny Iovino. And then
that's who you became then.
Yeah, I became Vinny Iovino. And the thing how I got to know Lou pretty good was in the off season and stuff, he would go speak. And the airport was probably 25 minutes away. So I was the one that would drive him to the airport and pick him up. So I did that the whole time, the 3 years I was at Minnesota. So I got to be pretty good, pretty tight with him just because we talked all the time. Yeah, it wasn't about football, just about other stuff. And, when he was going through the Notre Dame job stuff, he was talking to me about it and everything. So it was, and then, what was funny was when he takes the job at Notre Dame and he calls the staff. It was 10 o'clock at night, calls everybody in, and we all was like, hey, yeah, we're all going to Notre Dame. So we go into the staff meeting, and he sits down and he says, guys, I hate to tell you this, but you're all under contract, and, you're playing in a bowl game, and I can't take any of you till December the 18th, and that's too late for me to recruit. If any of you want to talk to me, meet me in my office after. I'll meet you one at a time. And got up and walked out, and we were like, damn, because we all thought we were going to Notre Dame, and now none of us is going to Notre Dame. So then my office was right next to his. So he pops in, he said, see me last. I said, all right. So I sat in my office till, like midnight or whatever. And he says, you want to go? I said, yeah. I says, what do you want me to coach? He says, I want you to be a secondary coach. I said, no. He says, why don't you want to be a secondary coach? I says, because that's what you coached. And I says, if I go coach secondary, I'll get fired, quicker than anything. Yeah. So I said, I'd like to be the recruiting coordinator and travel and do all that. And he says, well, let me think about that. I said, all right. So then, boom, he's gone the next day to South Bend. And then, we worked it out and everything. And I was the first one on the staff. He and I were at the Morris Inn and living in a hotel, different rooms, but we'd eat our meals together, but he eats in 30 seconds. And I eat fast. Well, I eat fast, but he eats. Done yet? But he was fun to be a great coach. I mean, speaking, you're in awe watching him speak. And then when you go to a school or you go to a home, you just sit there and he takes it. Right. You got it. Right. They're not here to see me at that point. They want to hear you. And when he'd walk into school, it was like the seas parted. It was unbelievable how, you hear the little whispers and everything when he's walking down the hall. That was pretty cool and stuff. And, I was on radio this morning and they were asking me about, how did he, he always won big games. How did he get teams ready for big games? And, I was telling the story and I thought about, when we played Miami in 94, when we were, or 94, 88, when we won national championship, the Catholics Convicts game. I remember we played Pitt Saturday night, won at Pitt Saturday night. Sunday morning, we have a staff meeting. And he looks at everybody in the staff meeting. He says, guys, he said, he'd been watching Miami for 3 weeks anyhow. So he says, It's Sunday. I don't know how we're going to beat them.
Wow.
I don't know how we're going to beat them, but by the end of the week, we'll find a way. And then he says, let me just tell you guys this week, positive week. I don't want anybody saying a negative word to a player. You build them up. We got to build them up. We got to build these guys up all week long to make them think by the end of the week they're unbeatable. And that's kind of, how he was. I mean, he was master motivator. I got one more good story that you would like this one. I think Rob probably knows this one. Reggie Ho, our kicker, the one who would do sideways. Reggie's out at practice, and he's doing his kicking drill, and I worked with the kicker, so I was standing out there too. So Lou comes out and standing there right next to him while he's watching him kick, try to put pressure on him when he's kicking. So Reggie looks up at him and says, "Coach, can't kick with you watching like that." And Lou goes, "Reggie, I do plan on being at every game."
That's a great line. And, I mean, you'll know it better than most, but he was good for no matter if you were playing the most inferior opponent and you're going to win 100
special teams.
Oh, yeah. They got a great kicker. They got a great kick return. He always had something about another team.
Yeah. And then another one, like what I would do is like on Monday nights, I would give Lou I would do an evaluation of their top starters on offense and defense. We were playing Air Force, who was ranked in the top 10 at the time. So he comes walking down the hall. I hand him the report. He says, "What do you think?" I said, "Coach, they don't have a guy that could play for us." He throws a report at my face. He says, "What are you talking about? They're ranked 8th in the country." I said, "Coach, I'm just telling you, they don't have a guy who can play for us." I think we beat them by 30.
A similar story to that. When you told me a story when you first got to Notre Dame. You went to Alabama. And, and Lou Holtz's idea was, we're going to coach all these guys up. We're going to coach these guys up. And
we'll coach everybody.
He changed his mind after the Alabama game. Tell us that story.
We played down in Legion Field, down in Birmingham. We're in Birmingham playing Alabama. Cornelius Bennett and all that. You remember the poster of Bennett with Birdline making that sack? That was the game. And we got pummeled. David Palmer, I think, ran a punt back for a touch, and it was packed. And I was sitting on the bus. Lou comes sit next to me, and he said, "We can get players like everybody else." We can't out-coach.
He went from out-coaching them to the X's and O's mean nothing without the Henrys and Joes. Listen, Vinny, as we come up to the end of the segment, if you could see, and I've always, when I lost somebody close to me, I always think of what would I tell them if I saw them today? If you saw Lou Holtz right now, what would you tell him?
I kind of got the chance, when we were there for the Hall of Fame, or not the Hall of Fame, when we were there for our reunion, not that many years ago, we were there for the reunion, and me and Becky got a chance to spend time with Lou because he was going to be in my wedding, and he came up and to both of us, and he said, "Listen, I just want to apologize." I said, "You don't have to apologize." He says, "No, I want to apologize because I was out of the country. I couldn't make it. I wanted to be there, but I just, wanted to thank you guys for inviting me and everything else." It was just a guy that if you needed him, he was always there. Like if Charlie, I remember calling him a couple of different times, like, "Coach, can you talk to Charlie? Can you motivate him a little bit?" "Sure, give me his number." Boom. Like the Penn State hockey coach, he called. He said, "Hey, give me some." I was reading some of these Lou Holtz quotes. What would Lou say? I said, "Here, let me call him and I'll have him call you." And he talked to him for an hour. And he called Mike Pence for Vincent when he was trying to get into the Naval Academy and got him his nomination. So he was only a phone call away if you needed anything. I remember when we were on a visit to Notre Dame for Charlie, when Brian Kelly wouldn't let me on the field. I called Coach. I said, "Coach, I'm at Notre Dame with Charlie's visit. Hey, if anything you need, let me know." And I said, "Coach, they won't let me on the field." "What?"
Well, Brian Kelly no one would tell these stories about Brian Kelly.
No. Well, how about I got one more about Brian Kelly. We're there for the reunion, and we're all going to the pep rally. I said, Coach, you come to the pep rally? You know, I figured they're playing Michigan. You know, you speaking? He said no. He wouldn't let me speak. You know, I said
Why would?
Because he's Brian Kelly.
Yeah, because
He's Brian Kelly.
Because Lou would take the shine off of him.
I'm not scheduling Brian Kelly's death by any stretch of the imagination, but when it happens, there's no one sitting on a microphone talking about him like he just talked about Lou Holtz.
I might say that. Because that cool dance he did with the recruits when he's spinning around in a circle.
Yeah. And let me just say this, too. Like, I was tight with his wife, Beth, Skip, Kevin, Liz, so I was tight. The older daughter, I didn't know her. But all the other ones were always around. Skip played at Notre Dame, and then Skip coached and everything. And Beth, she was, she was the fighter, man. Like people quietly, like when Bob Davie was screwing over Lou Holtz, and I called him out. I called Beth, and Beth says, "What'd you do?" I said, "Here's what I did." Blah blah blah. I told Bob Kelly. I said, Bob Davie, I know you're going up the back stairs behind Lou's back. She said, you told him that? I said, yeah. She says, good.
He's a piece of work, too. I'm sure Vinny will have a lot more stories on Vinny and Haney, man. Thanks a lot for your time,
My
Vinny.
pleasure, guys.